Since 1785, The Times has been essential reading.
Now, it's essential listening.
Times Radio chooses conversation over confrontation.
Covers Westminster and beyond.
Ask the right questions.
To keep you well informed.
We give words space and let the stories do the talking.
Listen on DAB radio, online, on your smart speaker or via our app.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Times and the Sunday Times Cheltenham Literature Festival. I'm Caroline Hutton. I'm the chair of the festival, but that's confusing because I'm also chairing this event. But they are two different things, but that's who I am. And I'm absolutely delighted to chair this now legendary annual classic literature debate with a difference, in which our four most excellent panelists, all writers, will use their persuasive powers to argue the case for a character in literature more usually held in the highest of esteem. So it's basically like bash a national treasure. That's what's going to be going on today. And they will try and convince you that the character that they've chosen is actually literature's greatest bore. Okay, so on stage today, ready to do battle and riding high on last year's success is defending champion, Caroline O'Donoghue.
Hello.
Woo! Caroline is the host of the award-winning podcast, Sentimental Garbage, author of Promising Young Women and Scenes of a Graphic Nature, and her latest novel, All Our Hidden Gifts, young adult novel, described as fiercely, ferociously good. So I'm hoping we'll get some fiercely, ferociously good debating going on here. Next to her, Anthony Quinn, author of 7 novels. Tony's latest novel, London Burning, set in 1970s London, an era, by the look of it, many of you will know a lot about, and tells the story of 4 Londoners throbbing with music, life, love, and skullduggery. Now, a little-known fact here, just to add some tension to the proceedings, is that Anthony's first break in journalism was given to him by the then literary editor of the Independent newspaper, none other than Sebastian Faulks. So, there's a bit of things to prove there. So, moving on to Sebastian, Anthony's former boss, obviously, literary heartthrob, and what else? Oh yes, author of some of our most acclaimed novels of our time. Sebastian has taken part in this classic literature debate every year, and since he first concocted the idea of doing something a little bit different with classic literature when he thought that perhaps we should have a debate about who's the biggest shit, Heathcliff or Darcy.
Yeah, I'm still bitter about losing
Sebastian?
that. Yeah.
Have you actually won? Have you ever won?
No, Heathcliff won. Darcy lost. I mean, it's still.
But have you ever won?
I'm still hoping it's going to VAR. We're still hoping to overturn the result.
And next to Sebastian, Elizabeth Day, host of the award-winning podcast How to Fail and book of the same name, and I think very excitingly might be being made into a TV show too. She's author of 5 novels, and her new novel, Magpie. Oh, Sebastian, I didn't mention your book. That's terrible.
Don't worry,
He doesn't need the publicity.
I'll come back to it. That's really bad. Elizabeth's new book, Magpie, which is so, so good, so brilliant. If you haven't read it, do so. And this is Sebastian's book, obviously. Snow
don't
Country.
worry, I'll give it a plug.
I'm so sorry, Sebastian. And all 4 of our panelists will be signing books at the Waterstones just here in the town hall after the event. So this is how it works. Each one will get up and state their case. Now, the point is that they're going to try and convince you that their characters are the greatest bore, and you will be voting later on about how convincing, whether your mind has been changed. That's the important bit. You can ask some questions, but you have to do it. Oh, are we going to get that up? It'll come up using the slido.com, where you put your questions into your. Is it there? Yes, there you go. So you enter the event code, and you can ask some questions. Then they will have a minute after the questions to reinstate their case, and then we'll take a vote from you, all of you. So when you show your hand, show it clearly. So that's enough of me. Caroline, to the lectern.
The long walk. Hello, everyone. Elizabeth said to me before the event, she said, I'm sick of everyone referring to you as the reigning champion. Here defending the title, although I shouldn't say, for context, last year when I did this, it was obviously in the height of COVID, and it was all separated seating in that, so really I had about 12 people voting, which constituted as a victory, and the person I chose as my figure I wanted to celebrate that year as who should be the next great American president was Kermit the Frog, who I'm wearing today. But today I'm coming back with a book because I want to prove to the people of Cheltenham I can actually read. And I've come with Around the World in 80 Days. And I'm going to totally deride the figure of Phileas Fogg. I don't think it's embarrassing to admit that Around the World in 80 Days is one of those books where everyone kind of knows the plot, but no one's really read it unless they were a Victorian child. And obviously it's one of those books oh, it was aimed at Victorian children, but it can be read by a 31-year-old with a BA and no lower, because it's quite hard, actually. But we all know that the basics of Around the World in 80 Days is Phileas Fogg is a London gentleman who, at his club one day, accepts a bet that he can go around the world in 80 days because he argues that modern technology and the British Empire has become so wonderful that he can do it and it can be done. And that's all I ever really knew. And I knew there was something at the end about time differences and setting your watch, and then you think he's going to make it, and then he doesn't make it, and then he does, and it's a big victory. But I thought, based on that premise alone, that Phileas Fogg would be quite good crack. I thought he'd be he's a swashbuckling gentleman, adventurer and all that kind of stuff. He is a dullard. He's overly fastidious, incredibly cheap, has very little care for the well-being of the people that surround him. I'm going to do a very short reading just to get us started. This is it comes very early on in the book where we're introduced to the character of Phileas Fogg. Phileas Fogg was a person of mathematical preciseness, someone who was never rushed but was always ready, always economical in his movements. He never took an unnecessary stride, and he always chose the shortest route. He never allowed himself to be distracted. He was careful never to make a superfluous gesture. He had never been known to be upset or disturbed. He was the least hurried person in the world, but he always arrived on time. However, it is easy to understand why he lived alone and without any social relationships. He knew that everyday life involved social contact, and because such contact took up time, he chose to live without it. I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to go on a road trip with this lad. And a Victorian road trip, including many steamships and at one point an elephant. So what happens here is he basically, Phileas Fogg loves two things in this life: whist and being right. And he gets into this argument while playing whist. Also, sidebar, I feel like everyone here, as people who read books, we all have come across a game of whist in a book. Does anyone know what it is? Is it Connect 4? Snakes and ladders? I don't know. Cards? Who knows? Who's come into his employ is the character of Passepartout, who is kind of the real hero of the story. He's this former French acrobat who's gone to live with Phileas Fogg to sort of live the quiet life, and then about 10 days into his employ, Phileas Fogg comes home and he's like, we're going around the world. Then he's like, all right, get my bags together. You have basically 2 hours to arrange this Passepartout, make it happen. And Passepartout gets it all together. He's very good at his job, is our man Passepartout. But then he's in the taxi out of the house in Savile Row, and he's like, oh my God, I left my heater on. And Phileas Fogg turns to Passepartout. Bear in mind, Phileas Fogg is a millionaire, and says, well, that'll come out of your wages. But meanwhile, Like, literally every single person Phileas Fogg meets on his travels, he just bombs money at them, like, all the time. Like, a random beggar woman comes up to him, he gives her a quid, like, he buys an elephant way over the market value. Like, he's just, like, splashing the cash everywhere. And meanwhile, Passepartout is like, I'm paying, like, by the day for my heater that's on in my... It's like... I think it's quite triggering because it's kind of like everyone's had that boyfriend who like really splashes the cash on the rounds in the bar, but then wants to go halves on you with like a Savoy cabbage. And it's like very frustrating. I should say as well that for me, this isn't just like a literary, theoretical, chin-stroking debate. It's kind of a personal grudge because, not just because I hate cheap people, but because I'm sure, like many of the people in the audience, during COVID, I had a real struggle trying to read and trying to concentrate on a book for a long period of time without picking up my phone and Googling how many people are dead in Swindon. And so I found books really difficult, and so I started playing video games a lot. And I stumbled across this game, and this was before I had read this book, called 80 Days. And what it was a video game version of Around the World in 80 Days. And if anybody has like a teenager at home who is reluctant to read, or perhaps a 31-year-old woman at home who can't read, I really recommend. There's so many video games out there that kind of really brings literature alive. And sort of the point of the video game is that you play as Passepartout, and you have to arrange the routes, and you have to get yourselves out of all these skirmishes all around the place. You have to buy and sell things. It's really exciting, but there's sort of a mini game which sort of maintains that you are still Phileas Fogg's valet, and so you have to sort of keep him kind of combed and fed, and whatever else a valet does. You have to press his shirts and trim his mustache. So essentially, he's like a Tamagotchi in this game. And for my first playthrough, I was like, oh, I can just ignore this man, and it doesn't really matter how he's doing if his mustache doesn't get combed. If his mustache doesn't get combed, he gets ill. He gets ill, and like he will not leave his bedroom in Hong Kong because he's got jungle fever because I didn't press his shirts, which is how disease works, as we've all learned. So really, I've come into this thing. I started reading Around the World in 80 Days, partly because I wanted to sort of rediscover the world when it was so open, because the world has felt extremely closed lately. And reading about Ceylon when it was still called Ceylon, and steamers and all this. But I also read it because I wanted a cheat guide to the game. And what I also found out is not just is he annoying, fussy, and cheap. He's also just fundamentally uncurious about everything that happens to his life. So Passepartout makes a point when he's observing Phileas Fogg that he never looks outside the window once. As soon as he gets to a destination, he's like, right, I have 12 hours until we have to go to Japan. I'm going to stay in my hotel room. To the point where chapter 14 is literally called In Which Phileas Fogg Travels the Whole Length of the Wonderful Valley of the Ganges Without Thinking It Worth a Look. And what also annoys me is that the narrative, Jules Verne is like, he's obsessed with telling us about how ingenious and calm and collected our hero is. But like every time he gets into a skirmish, he just throws money at the problem until the problem goes away. And it's like to the point where he gets people like, there's this one part where he's missed sorry, this is very boring details, but most of this book is just someone else's travel itinerary. It's like a TripAdvisor in a book. But like he misses the steamer from Singapore to Hong Kong, and so he's like, okay, I'll just pay this guy in his sailboat to take us there. And obviously that journey is going to kill that man. Mm-hmm. It's not a calm journey, but he just keeps throwing money at him until he says yes. And so basically this world that has been absolutely stripped bare by the British Empire just has fat little Fogg going around, just being like, go on, do it for me, I'm British and I have a quid, it'll be a laugh. And it's not a laugh. Fogg, strangely enough, does find love in this book. About halfway through, there's the tale of Princess Aouda, who is, to be honest, it's quite a racist story. They're traveling through India. There is this terrible story about this young woman who has been selected to be burned at the stake as part of a religious sort of cult ritual. And Phileas Fogg, who has been obsessed with sort of keeping time, he says that, "We are 12 hours ahead of schedule. I will save her." Provided it takes less than 12 hours. And they sort of nominally fall in love. Princess Aouda doesn't speak any English, and she's very beautiful, which makes her sort of the ideal woman, and apparently, according to the narrative. And I want to believe, I truly do, that people can meet without language and have a sort of a great attraction to one another on a sort of a base essence level, you know. I don't think that's what's happening here. I think what's happened is she can't understand how much of a terrible bore he is, how much of his chat is crap, and how cheap he is because he keeps buying her clothes. So I'm going to finish off with reading the very last paragraph, which I actually do think is a very beautiful piece of writing. And so Phileas Fogg had won his bet. He had completed this journey around the world in 80 days. To do so, he had used all possible means of transport: steamships, railways, carriages, yachts, commercial vessels, a sledge, and yes, an elephant. The eccentric gentleman had displayed throughout his outstanding qualities of composure and precision. But apart from this, what had he gained from all his travel? What had the journey brought him? Nothing, it could be said. Nothing, that is, except for a charming wife who, however unlikely it may seem, made him the happiest of men. And in all truth, isn't this more than enough reward for going around the world? Which I think is lovely, but I would need more to go around the world with Phileas Fogg. Personally. Thank you very much. Woo!
Oh, she set the bar very high. Very high. Anthony, you feeling brave?
Hello, everyone. I'm feeling already like the guy who shot Bambi's mum here, because I'm going to talk about a character who is deeply beloved, possibly to many of you in this hall. His name is Connell, and he's from Normal People. Sally Rooney can't compete with Jane Austen, and that's not her fault, because no modern novelist can. Nonetheless, she's talked about as the millennials' Jane Austen, and in Normal People, the lovers are reminiscent of two great Austen characters. Marianne starts out as a kindred spirit of Anne Elliot in Persuasion, the wallflower's wallflower. Bright, lonely, oppressed by her awful family. Connell is a bit like Frank Churchill in Emma, a popular lad, but secretive and unreliable. And a quarter of the way in to the book, Sally Rooney pulls a little switcheroo. Marianne and Connell are at university, and now she's the popular one. He's shy and insecure. It's a neat idea, but it doesn't work for the simple reason that Connell is fundamentally misconceived. Where she wants him to be vulnerable, he's just flaky. Where he's meant to be this kind of romantic cavalier, he's a passive-aggressive jerk. She wants us to think he's got hidden depths, and all we can see are hidden shallows. The drama in the early stages revolves around the Debs, which is the local equivalent of the Netherfield Ball. Connell, despite having a secret affair with Marianne, asks someone else to the dance, which is the first of several odd betrayals he perpetrates. Later, he dumps her abruptly after she's let him stay in her apartment for 3 months, drinking the beer she bought for him. We know Marianne is a masochist, but what does she really see in Connell? Is she trying to bore herself to death? When someone asks if he's having fun, he replies, a reasonable amount, I would say. when he does open up, he's hopelessly trite. I think I did learn from it. Hopefully. Hopefully I've changed, as a person. This is from a student who's supposedly moved by literature. Rooney says literature moves him. But he doesn't have one interesting opinion about any book he's ever read. Maybe at some point Sally Rooney suspects that he isn't that scintillating, so she amps up his star quality. He's a good footballer, insanely attractive to women, and a gifted student. He doesn't seem to have to try at anything. He aces all his exams. He wins a scholarship to relieve his money worries. And at the end, he's offered a place on a creative writing program in New York. This is Rooney's idea of a normal person. Marianne considers him wholesome, like a big baby tooth. And another, by the way, apologies to Caroline for my terrible Irish accent. What he doesn't appear to have is any actual personality. He's a black hole at the story's center, squatting on it, sucking away all the energy. Connell, though, isn't just the star of a hugely popular novel. As we now know, he's also sex god from a hugely popular television series. And unfortunately, I'm the only person in the world who hasn't actually watched this TV series. It was hard enough having to read the book twice, to be honest. But the reviews of the show did make me suspicious. Because what did they identify as the vital feature of Paul Mescal's performance as Connell? Was it some intriguing flaw or emotional kink? No. It was the fact that he wore a thin gold chain around his neck. Bling went the string of my heart. But it also reminded you that gold can be dull too. Thank you.
Oh, Anthony, what have you done?
Killed myself, probably.
I actually loved the accent. It was very good.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Sebastian, are you ready to refute that controversial but sadly convincing?
Yes. Oh, here we go. So, the most boring character in fiction, in literature, it was a very big field, really. I toyed with the idea of Linda Radlett from The Pursuit of Love, but I thought that no one in Cheltenham would ever speak to me again. Her silly Hans cupboard and her pathetic French lover, the Duc de Sauveterre, the stage frog. I mean, come on, please. Also, Gandalf. Gosh, Gandalf. I mean, his role seems to be mostly that of a sort of sat-nav. He's always telling Frodo, rise at dawn and travel 3 days across the plain of Mordor. You battle at night with elvish folk who come to disturb your sleep on day 5, cross the mighty river of tedium, and mind not losing men and mules to the flood. Go by foot 6 days through the snow-clad mountains of Anomy and gather those left to you in the burning roads of Quagmire. Your destination is on your left. However, I've chosen Alice in Wonderland, the girl who wouldn't play. This is a story of a very dreary little girl who falls down a hole, where she meets a variety of pretty interesting creatures who try to engage her in play. But will she, heck? Halfway down this fall, she wonders how far she's fallen. I think it might be 4,000 miles, she says. For you see, Alice had learned several things of this sort in her lessons in the schoolroom. Now, the Victorian age, as we know, was on the one hand a period of great exploration and adventure. Go to the Royal Geographic Society and you'll see the great names of Mungo Park, Stanley and Livingstone. We think of Darwin, we think of Dickens, Tennyson and Brunel. But it was also, as we know, an era, the flip side, of repression, religiosity, hypocrisy and long division. And it is this world that Alice represents. Dinah will miss me very much, I should think, she says as she is about to drink some intoxicating potion. And Dinah is her cat. And Dinah is more than this. Dinah is the moral touchstone of the Victorian hearth. Drink me, says the bottle. Well, it was all very well to say drink me, but wise little Alice was not going to do that in a hurry. Oh, no, no, no. She's the girl at the school disco you offer a drink to, and before she accepts, you say, what's in it? You're only trying to... You're only trying to be kind because she's had no one to dance with. And then as she changes size several times under the ground, she undergoes a kind of identity crisis. But to solve her identity crisis, what does she do? Does she turn to Ruskin or Pater or Emily Bronte? Oh, no, 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 not Alice. She tries her multiplication tables. Let me see. 4 times 5 is 12. 4 times 6 is 13. And so it goes on. As a very large girl, she cries a lot. And a pool of tears develops around her, and she begins to swim in the pool of tears, where she meets a mouse. But the mouse doesn't speak English. Oh, dear. And she responds in the way that all little Englanders do to mice who don't speak English. She supposes that the mouse might be French. And the first thing she says to the mouse, therefore, is, "Où est ma chatte?" Where is my cat? A pretty odd thing to say to a mouse of any nationality. It's probably the most interesting thing that Alice says in the whole book, actually, but only if you're aware of French smut, in which case you have a little giggle. She then tells the mouse, I'm sure you'd take a fancy to cats if only you could see Dinah. But the mouse swims away swiftly at this point. Enter a parrot, to whom Alice says, I wish I had our Dinah here. I know I do. And who is Dinah? Asks the parrot. Oh, Dinah's our cat. I wish you could see her after the birds. Why, she'll eat a little bird as soon as look at it. And off flies the parrot. Well, not every creature that Alice meets in Wonderland is sort of tremendously exciting. There's a pigeon who is a bit of a crasher, and there's a large puppy. I'm not quite sure what his raison d'etre is. But, you know, the white rabbit's pretty good fun with his watch, and he's late, and he's in a hurry, and his white gloves. And then we have, of course, the stoned caterpillar smoking his hookah of opium on a large leaf. But does Alice ask for a puff? Oh, no, 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 not wise little Alice. Then she encounters a frog footman and a duchess with a piglet as a baby. This is interesting. Miscegenation, cross-species, genetic engineering. But, oh no, none of that. Alice concludes after this extraordinary scene that there's too much pepper in the soup. She's then given the piglet as the baby to walk away with. Does she adopt the piglet? Does she try to educate it? Does she take care of it? No, she just says to the piglet, don't grunt. That's not at all a proper way of expressing yourself. And then we come to the most famous scene, the Mad Hatter and the March Hare and the Dormouse. I mean, pretty exciting scene, you'd have to say. And Alice reflects, how very uncomfortable for the Dormouse, but I suppose it's as it's asleep, it doesn't really mind. And then the Mad Hatter says, would you like a glass of wine, my dear? And she says, no, I don't think so. And he says, oh, just as well, we haven't got any. And Alice says, well, it isn't very civil of you to offer it then, is it? And you can see that this is a governess in the making. Finally, we get to see the inner Alice, the real Alice, when she's given what novelists call style indirect libre. It means that she gets to speak as though it's from her inner thought, her heart's. And this is where she reveals herself, and this is the big moment when we get to know the true Alice. When I'm a duchess, she said to herself, I won't have any pepper in my kitchen at all. Soup does very well without. Maybe it's always pepper that makes people hot-tempered. she went on, very much pleased at having found out a new kind of rule, and vinegar that makes them sour, and chamomile makes them bitter, and barley sugar and such things make them...
Sweeter.
Yes! I only wish people knew that, then they wouldn't be so stingy about it. So anyway, let's celebrate the Victorian era. Let's be with George Eliot, but let's be with Dorothea and not with Casaubon. Let's leave Alice to her cat diner and her multiplication and her vespers on a Sunday evening. And let's go with Tennyson. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield. Thank you.
Thank you, Sebastian, for that extremely strong and literary case against a poor little girl. Elizabeth.
Saving the most boring till last. Thank you. Caroline has come dressed as Kermit the Frog. I've come dressed as the sofas. It's such a delight to be here. It's such a fun event. And I did have a few thoughts before I finally settled on my great literary bore. Initially, I wanted to choose The Bench from the children's book written by Meghan, Duchess of Sussex, because although Sebastian's done a good case for Alice in Wonderland, I don't think there is any more boring children's character than someone whose entire character can be summed up as, I am sat on. But it was against the rules, so I couldn't have The Bench. And then I thought of Gabriel Oak from Far From the Madding Crowd, because I remember doing that book for GCSE and being incredibly bored by how obsessed he was with his sheep. But I saw the most recent film adaptation, adapted by David Nichols, and the Danish actor Matthias Schoenaerts, his sexual dynamism just blew me away. So now I just think of Gabriel Oak entirely differently. So I've chosen Clutch Your Pearls, Hercule Poirot. Now, I should preface this by saying I do love Hercule Poirot and I do love Agatha Christie books, but that doesn't mean that he isn't boring. And you might be labouring under the misapprehension that Poirot is interesting because he solves so many murders, but this is to fall into a trap. Because Poirot himself isn't half as interesting as the things that occur around him. We're encouraged to think he's exciting, but actually the majority of the drama isn't generated by Hercule Poirot. Just because he finds himself at the centre of the action doesn't mean that he himself is interesting. I'd also add to that the fact that you know he's always going to solve the grisly murder, and that in and of itself is boring because there's no jeopardy. So let us consider what makes a person boring. Number one, and Caroline also touched on this, fastidiousness. Hercule Poirot is extremely fussy and precise in his tastes and demands, which makes him a boring person to be around. This is someone so obsessed with order and method that even his breakfast is subjected to completely unnecessary regulation. He has to have toast made from a perfectly square loaf and 2 boiled eggs of exactly the same size. Can you imagine anything more boring than going to brunch with Hercule Poirot? And having to sit there as he sends the waitress back and forth, and she has to keep coming back with eggs that are perfectly symmetrical. There is nothing more boring than that concept. Number two, what makes a person boring? Obsessive neatness. There are few things more dull than someone who takes hours to dress themselves. And Poirot spends an inordinate amount of time on his appearance, from his immaculately groomed moustache to his patent leather shoes. He uses a special preparation called Revive It to conceal his grey hair. So he's vain as well as boring. The first time Inspector Hastings ever meets Poirot in The Mysterious Affair at Styles, he says of him, "The neatness of his attire was almost incredible. I believe a speck of dust would have caused him more pain than a bullet wound." A bullet wound, ladies and gentlemen. Forget Aggie Mackenzie or Mrs. Hinch. Poirot is so hung up on cleanliness that he would rather die than see limescale on your shower head. He's the kind of person who you'd invite round to your house and he'd spend the whole time sniffing disapprovingly at the dust on your mantelpiece and the teaspoon you forgot to put in the dishwasher. In short, a bore. Number 3, nationality. Poirot is Belgian. Belgium is widely acknowledged to be the most boring country in the world, apart from Luxembourg. In an attempt to find anything interesting about Belgium, I turned to Google and asked it for some moderately unboring facts about the country. The most interesting fact that Google returned about Belgium is that it holds the world record for the longest time without a government, a period which lasted for 589 days in 2010. Following national elections, the opposing Flemish and Walloon regions were unable to agree on policy issues and were unable to form a governing coalition. Are you asleep yet? Because I am. Because that's arguably the most boring historical fact about any country. And Poirot is from Belgium. So for these reasons, which I'm sure you all agree you can't argue with, I nominate Hercule Poirot as the greatest literary bore. Fastidiousness, his vanity, and his Belgianness. I feel confident in saying you wouldn't necessarily want to be stuck on a desert island with him. And if you were, you'd have a distinctly higher than average chance of ending up murdered, which is even more of an excuse to steer clear. Do not be deceived by the fact that exciting things happen around Hercule Poirot. He is not exciting. He is, in fact, quite the opposite. Thank you.
Very good. Could have gone on longer.
Sorry, it's rather short.
Very good.
Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I don't envy you your soon vote. I mean, 4 characters that when you entered this room, you may have held dear to your hearts, now sadly savaged and left on the floor. We're going to take a few questions. If I can work the Slido. Robin, can I work it? We're going to take a few questions, if there are any questions. But before that, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to address one question to one of the other panelists.
Sebastian?
Yes, here we go.
Hello, Caroline.
Do you hate all 9-year-old girls or just fictional ones?
And what are you giving girls to drink at the disco?
I think we have a right to check what's in the drink,
That was
actually.
worrying. Sort of a rohypnol moment there.
Okay. So, at the disco, there was something called wine cup. Do you remember that?
No, Sebastian.
Yeah. We hadn't invented cocaine in those days, Elizabeth. It was a sort of mixture of wine and lemonade and bits of fruit. It was really, truly repulsive, and it never got anyone remotely drunk, so that was good. So you really didn't need to check what was in it. And sorry, what was your question, Caroline? Do I hate all girls?
Do you hate all 9-year-old girls or just fictional ones?
Oh, no. I had a 9-year-old girl once, a daughter. I obviously adored her. No, I just hate tedious little, prim little, priggish little madams. But most 9-year-old girls are a total delight, and heading to Cheltenham Ladies' College in just 2 years' time. And God bless them all.
I agree.
Okay, very good. Anyone else got a question for one of the other panelists?
Tony, I want to ask you about Connell.
Oh.
Okay, so you mention in your excellent speech about the fact that Connell has a secret affair with Marianne. And I would contend that that makes him not boring. To have a secret affair, there has to be an element of excitement in your personal life.
I think that's
good question.
Yeah, yeah, but he does have a secret affair, and you can never work out why he won't admit it. The least he can do is take her to the bleeding Debs, though, isn't it? It's just take her to the dance. It's the fact that he sort of sneakily asks another girl, and it's a horrible betrayal, but it's a sort of silent betrayal of her.
But that makes him unlikable, but doesn't make might make him boring.
You've got a point there. Yeah. Oh my God, I've been caught in the trap.
Can I ask Tony a question too?
Yes, sorry, we've got an audience question for you, Anthony. Do you think that Marianne is as dull as Connell?
I don't actually. I think she's actually more interesting, but I think both of them are struggling with the problem of Sally Rooney's sort of meat and potato prose. I think the actual writing.
Well, okay, we'll stop there.
Right.
Also,
Everybody
we've had another point here saying the chain is not gold, it's silver. But wait for it. So there.
I read it was gold, honestly.
Can I ask Tony
gold.
something? I mean, you didn't see the television thing, and I did see it. And the part of the problem is the poor chap runs out of lines. They don't give him any lines to say, apart from, I don't know.
I remember you doing a very good impersonation of that on holiday, actually, and you were saying, it's just, I don't know. So every question that he was asked, it was just, I don't know.
But there is a tremendous amount of focus on both the whatever the necklace is and on his undercarriage, which we see a tremendous amount of.
Do you really?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think his undercarriage is actually more interesting than he is, really. But it's certainly more vivacious. My question is, do you know how many?
Sebastian.
Do you know how many times he says, "I don't know"? Is it 28, 57, or 149?
57.
I don't know.
Here's a good audience question from Kathy. 3 out of the 4 characters are men. Does this panel think that there were more boring male characters in books than female characters?
That's
good
a
question.
great question.
Elizabeth, what do you think?
I think...
I mean, it's a big question.
It's a big question. No, not necessarily. But I do think that there is something that you have identified, Tony, in Connell, where, historically speaking, a male character might not constantly be exploring the limits of his own vulnerability. And so, therefore, it might be more difficult for a novelist to bring that to the fore in a convincing way. But I think that's hugely changed. And actually, I do think that one of the most interesting things about Connell is how he deals with mental health issues, and I think that can explain a lot of why he doesn't speak that much.
You're making such a good case for him.
I'm sorry, do you love him now?
Sorry, I've just been blown out of the water.
One of the audience questions is, aren't you just jealous of how cool and hot and sexy he is, Anthony?
No, because
I thought that was obvious, to be honest. I mean, I've been wearing a Goldie-looking chain for about 30 years. Nobody's ever called me a sex symbol.
Look, we don't have any time left. We have the panelists got another question or two you'd like to pose to each other?
I mean, I've got a question for Caroline, although
yes.
I was completely convinced, defending champion. But I suppose the only thing that I would say in favour of Phileas Fogg is that at least he developed the conceit for the journey in the first place, which is relatively interesting.
Well, actually, in the book, he sat in his club and everyone's arguing about how long it would take. And it more comes out of this desire to be correct than it does to have an adventure. So he's kind of that man. You know, when you go to a guy and you're like, oh, can I use your bathroom? And he's like, I don't know if you can. Certainly may. He's that man, which I think is needs to be thrown into a volcano onto one of his many trips.
And equally with Hercule Poirot, there's something kind of wonderful about the fact that you know that you'd be like safe with him. You could go into any kind of terrible situation and he would, and that makes him...
Could you? Well, the thing about Hercule Poirot is that because he is so forensic in his approach with his little grey cells, that a lot of the time he doesn't take on board human emotion in others. So in Death on the Nile, I don't know if you remember, but in the opening chapters, there's a scene where he's in a restaurant, and he basically eavesdrops on this couple's very intense, loving conversation and kind of stalks them a bit. He gets very, very involved in their relationship dynamic. And so I don't think you'd feel necessarily safe confiding in him, because he always boringly has the idea of sort of justice and retribution at the fore, of solving things. Like, that's more important to him than being kindly sometimes.
Okay,
what would Hercule be like in the bedroom, do you think?
Very fastidious. Very precise. He'd insist on the person that he was sleeping with having a shower first, I think. And I'm not sure how he'd feel about disrobing entirely. I think he'd keep sort of, leg braces on or something, or just like socks. Very specific Belgian socks he'd probably wear.
With sock suspenders, maybe.
Exactly.
I think jeune fille or jeune homme?
Oh my God. What?
Okay, alors.
I think neither. I actually think he's asexual, but he's a very modern character in that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, pretty interesting then.
Yeah. Oh. Damn it. But I don't. I don't think he intends to be interesting. I think that was just...
Which of us does, love?
Here's another audience question. Oh, it's gone somewhere. Do you think that having a boring character in any of your books makes the book boring? Yes or no, Caroline?
No, definitely not. Like, I definitely deeply enjoyed the novel, despite Phileas Fogg's boringness. And actually, I think it is that classic buddy cop thing of like, yes, we've got this very fastidious older gentleman, and we have Passepartout, who is a French acrobat who's always ending up in opium dens. And like, I do think the power of the foil is always going to be very tasty to readers. It doesn't matter what era it comes from, as long as you've got two people who are significantly different in ways that are sort of attractive enough. It's just always gonna run and run, isn't it?
Okay.
I think that's true. I mean, I think you can have boring characters who do offset the main character. You know, you're thinking of Nick Carraway in The Great Gatsby, and also a book that's absolutely sacred to me, Brideshead Revisited. Nancy Mitford wrote to Evelyn Waugh and said, isn't Charles Ryder a bit dim? And he says, yeah, of course he is. So I think he makes the scene brighter through his own dullness in a weird way. I don't think there's a problem as long as you can understand him. It's not about him being boring. It's just about your, sympathizing with him.
Yes, they contribute a lot. I mean, they kind of think of the porter in Macbeth who's a fantastic bore, but you need a bit of a light relief from all the blood, and make some bloke making jokes about drinking too much and then not being able to perform it. It's just what you need. Or Miss Bates in Emma is a tremendous bore, but she performs a tremendously important function in the plot when Emma insults her and Mr. Knightley tells off Emma, and suddenly Knightley realizes what we've known all along, that he's in love with Emma. Mr. Knightley himself is a bit of a crasher. Now I come to think of it.
That's unfair.
We'll say that for next year.
Yeah. I also think that there's a great deal of joy to be had about reading about nothing much happening if the writer is good enough. So Diary of a Nobody is a delight, as is one of my favourite books of all time, is The Fortnight in September by R.C. Sheriff, which is a Persephone book. Good. And it's about a family who go on holiday, and that's it. You read so much into this family's dynamics and the nuance of their everyday relationships that it ends up being anything but boring, even though they're quite everyday characters.
Okay. Very interesting. Now, we're going to allow the panelists to just say one more thing about each of their characters, the final hurrah. You can stay sitting down for this, perhaps, to convince you all. Are you all nearly ready to vote? Yes, they are. Okay, well, let's go backwards this time.
Yes.
Elizabeth, why should Hercule Poirot be considered literature's greatest bore?
Well, I think you all need to ask yourselves a very serious question, and it is, who would you least like to be stuck in a corner of a party with? Who would you least like to be stuck in a lift with? Who would you least like to be stuck on a desert island with when there's a higher than average chance that you'll end up dead? And on top of that, the danger of that situation doesn't make the character that you're stuck with any more interesting. He's actually quite boring. Likeable, but boring. And as I think I've revealed through my Poirot-like forensic questioning, that actually there are interesting facets to all of the rest of the other characters. And I would contend also that Alice is interesting because the entire conceit is from her imagination. So she must have a wild imagination. And that's why you should vote for Hercule Poirot. Thank you.
Sebastian.
I'm going to call a final last witness, who is the Mock Turtle, who's the best character in the book. He's a turtle's body with a calf's head and calf's feet, which is a very exciting in-joke, because when they'd killed all the turtles to make turtle soup, they had to make mock turtle soup, which is made out of calves' heads. Disgusting it sounds. Anyway, the Griffin and the Mock Turtle are the last people that Alice meets, and they are great fun, and they have been educated at the bottom of the sea. And the Mock Turtle says to Alice, "Our master was an old turtle. We called him Tortoise." "Why did you call him Tortoise if he wasn't one?" Alice asked. "We called him Tortoise because he taught us," said the Mock Turtle angrily.
You really are very dull.
Don't take my word for it. Take the Mock Turtle's word for it.
Anthony.
I know I've made myself hugely dislikable by choosing Connell, and I'm sorry to you all. But I was trying to think of what character he reminded me of all the way through my 2 readings of this book, and he's a sort of noble kind of creature in a way, very good-looking, handsome, built, and yet Sally Rooney doesn't actually seem to know what to do with him, and she certainly doesn't know how he communicates. And that's the character he actually reminds me of is Tarzan. He's basically Tarzan with a gold chain and an English degree.
Silver.
And that's it. Silver. Beg your pardon.
So
I rest my so-called case.
Caroline.
Well, to re-invoke Elizabeth's argument, you're dead right. It does come down to who would you hate to be stuck in a lift with, stuck at a party with, stuck at a desert island with. And when I confront my own prejudices, I can deal with a hot guy who's monosyllabic. I can project endless fantasies onto him, and as Sebastian pointed out, a wonderful undercarriage.
Unforgettable, hasn't it?
Similarly, I can deal with somebody who is prim and a bit high-pitched and annoying. I can deal with someone even who's Belgian.
Come on now. That's too far.
What I cannot deal with in polite or impolite company is someone who is fundamentally uncurious about the world around them. That's why we're all here. We're all readers because we're curious. We're all readers because we want to discover more of the world around us, that we have an insatiable appetite to just know more, what people think, how they feel, what things look like, what the Ganges looks like. And I think that is absolutely the crime against humanity here.
Thank you.
That's a really good point.
Right. Now, good, some lights. That's very good. Okay. I'm going to have to hope that there's a landslide victory. It's going to be hard to do it. Okay, let's start. Well, let's start how we ended. Can I have votes, please, for Caroline's Phileas?
Oh, lad.
Oh, that's a lot. Very good. Okay, hands down. Can I have votes, please, for Anthony's Connell? It's a fair showing. It's a fair showing.
Yeah.
You've touched some.
Even you've offended every woman under 14 here.
Can I have a show of hands, please, for Alice, Sebastian's Alice?
Oh, Sebastian.
They love her.
Okay. And can I have a show of hands, please, for Hercule, Elizabeth Hercule? Oh my goodness. She's done it again.
All these people.
She's done it again. She's done it again. Stand up.
Brilliant.
Stand up. Take a bow.
Take a bow.
Thank you.
Well done, Caroline. I feel like I should give her a sort of a Wimbledon trophy.
Where's the wrestling belt?
I don't know. I'll have it for next year.
I've got 2.
I promise. And thank you to all of our amazing panelists. Thank you to you for coming and supporting this wonderful event. We'll see you next year for it. So we'll see Caroline. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, Sebastian. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Caroline. And they'll all be signing books afterwards in Waterstone. So go and chat to them there, if you will. Thank you all for coming. Well done.
Thank you all.
Like flowers cultivate in cracks in the concrete, culture grows in the spaces between the everyday. It's there in darkened rooms when the stage lights come on. It's in a park full of people belting out the same song. It happens in classrooms, having a go, hands-on. It's found in small circles, exchanging stories. It's under a tent, making brand new discoveries. It's in those shared experiences that help build communities. It inspires change, provides opportunities. It brings joy, sparks curiosity. It provokes feelings recognisable to everyone, making our hearts race and giving us goosebumps. It's for those who don't think they can have it. It's for those who know that they need it. It fosters connection and understanding. It is ours for the taking, as well as the sharing. Culture is what makes us human. It makes our world better. Culture is our culture. Let's explore it together.
Hello everyone, thanks for joining us.
Cheltenham is really, really famous for aliens. There are more aliens in Cheltenham than any other place in the whole world.
Shimmy! Where's the shimmy, 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 shimmy?
Oh, excellent. Very
like
good.
all the colours are tapping their feet as Luna shows Dad how to pirouette. Whoa. And it's like the sun is boogieing behind every cloud as Luna and Mum do the crazy legs.
Being a writer is about your ideas.
It's brilliant. It's great to inspire the new generations of writers, hopefully.
Probably come back next weekend.
You had to deal with homeschooling.
Oh no.
Yeah, not that. Was my respect for teachers is shot right up. Well, to be fair, my kids go to quite a posh school, and the weekly lesson plan came with a wine list. Pairing suggestions for the different subjects. With English, obviously a nice rosé. History, dry white, very dry, very white. And then all the art subjects, just some nice Prosecco.
I grew up with the idea that it was important to be the best. So as kids, we were challenging each other with different things. And I always wanted to do, jump the highest, jump the longest, do the most dangerous stunt. All of these things, I wanted to be the guy that they had to be.
The first one I've ever been to, and I'll come again.
Because I only live about 10 minutes away, so to have someone like Peter Schmeichel just on your doorstep is amazing, and it's great to have things like this back again after 18 months we've had.
One year there was a national competition for the 50-metre sprint, and when I was 10, and the 4 kids in my year, we were like all in the top 100 of the whole of the country. And then my mum pointed out that it's because our running track, because we were on Dartmoor, was downhill.
He has to have toast made from a perfectly square loaf and 2 boiled eggs of exactly the same size. Can you imagine anything more boring than going to brunch with Hercule Poirot?
Do you know what? I've always read crime, and I've always wanted to write a novel. And as anyone who's written, I'm sure there are plenty of people here who have, it's really difficult. And it takes a really long time.
It's been amazing. We've had a great day. We've seen some wonderful people, and the kids have had a great time doing the arts and crafts. So yeah, lovely time.